You can't shine if you're feeding the shadows. Stay in the present, which means you lose a point, but you've got to get back and start playing the next point as though you're starting all over again.
I think you can be happy by doing things which is within your circle of influence, things that you can make a difference to, things that which are in your control. And if you can do that, that is really a key to happiness.
So look, I think happiness, just like diversity actually, is a social concept. It's not the hours you put in at work, but it's the work that you're able to put in in those hours.
What is really in your hands is what you should focus on for happiness.
Biggest disservice that we do to diversity is by getting into metrics.
So unfortunately, HR teams land up making policies based on this 5%, which 95% then people have to suffer.
My belief is that women fundamentally, genetically, are far more intelligent, empathetic, and have a far higher EQ than men have.
Hi there, welcome to Unplug with Priyanka. I have today with me Amit Chincholikar. He's a seasoned CHRO with about 30 years of experience and worked with organizations like Aditya Birla, Tata's, and Yokohama. And he's a very dear friend, and I'm sure you'll have an interesting conversation and have quite a few takeaways for your learning today. Welcome, Amit, to the show.
Thank you for having me, Priyanka. It's great to be here.
So Amit, I'm just going to get straight away started. The theme of my podcast is really happiness and happiness at workplace. And we know happiness actually is not what you do, but it's who you are, right? It comes from somewhere beyond what you do regularly at work. So what do you want to share with us on that?
Priyanka, I read something very interesting that said, you can't shine if you're feeding the shadows.
Okay.
And what that really means is you've got to have a sense of self-belief that comes from who you are.
Right.
Now, a lot of us mistake who we are to what we do. So if you look at a conversation and someone asks you, hey, who are you?
Yeah.
And we normally pull out a card and give a designation
Correct.
or a title, and that's how we are conditioned.
Right.
But I was lucky enough to realize fairly early in life that what you do and who you are, how shall I say, mutually exclusive but collectively exhaustive. They kind of complete each other. So what I have always found is that work is important. A lot of us, professionals derive a lot of joy from the work we do. But we must recognize that there is a world that is outside of work.
Yes.
I mean, people call it work-life balance, work-life integration, whichever way you refer to it. But I think having something to do outside of work, having something to look forward to beyond what you call as the professional realm. Now, it can be a hobby, it can be a passion, it is something that can keep you engaged. But it's really important. And what I found is having something like that, keeps the glue to keep you going. Because I think the key element that keeps you alive when you do that, in my view, is curiosity.
Right.
So
what is it for Amit, which is beyond work, and what is that keeps you going?
Oh, so I would say a lot of things actually.
Okay.
One, of course, is that I've been an avid, not necessarily very good, but I've been a very avid quizzer from the time I was young. So what happens is, and if you talk to great quizzers, they'll always tell you that it's not about the knowledge, but it's the ability to work out, what the solution might be in a quizzing question, which is a great joy. So I've just been a great quizzer or a great fan of good quizzing.
Okay.
And, there have been so many opportunities. There are Tata Crucible is a great example wherein you really get to see such great quizzing in action. I'm a little bit of an amateur theatre buff. So I've done a little bit of theatre, and two really beautiful things that theatre teaches you is that there is no concept of retake. So you've got to get it right, absolutely right, day after day, every time. So you're only as good as the last dialogue that you spoke, because there is no retake.
Right.
And the third, of course, is, I think, which is true, and it's a lesson I've carried in life always, is that like in life, theatre teaches you that actually it is backstage that makes front stage happen.
Okay.
So while you clap and applaud for an actor, right, it's someone who did the set design. It's someone who got the lights. It's someone who created the effect, who, wrote the script, actually that got it to life. So these have been really, humbling experiences that I've kind of had that have kind of helped me relax. I'm a little bit of an how should I say, amateur runner as well, but
Okay.
that's more because it just allows me to spend time with myself.
Okay.
Because that's the one hobby that you can just do by yourself. You don't
Yes,
need
you don't
anybody
need
to be
anybody.
with you. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what I do outside of work.
That's interesting. But yeah, I think it's people, all the behind the scenes who put it together. Like for us in our case, it is Superworks and Anirudh and team who does that for us.
Thank you guys for doing this for us.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. So yeah, that's good. So to take this forward, Amit, there is always that one moment in every leader's life which really changes you or transforms you. Is there some pivotal moment in your life which sort of changed your perspective towards happiness, engagement? What is that moment? Can you share something with us?
Sure. So I would say maybe there have been 2 or 3 of them.
Okay.
One of them was in my very first job when I worked for a global express delivery company,
Okay.
and the moment came when and we prided ourselves on the fact that we had the world's largest aircraft fleet. We had the latest um, scanner technology. Bear in mind, this was 25 years ago.
Okay.
And we had, a promise, or we had great pride in saying, therefore, we are the best in the world. And what I realized in a pivotal moment of truth is all this counted for nothing if you're not able to effect a delivery to a customer on time.
Right.
And why that became so important was the joy that a customer service representative, who was your final contact with the customer,
Okay.
right? Someone who came on a bike to do a delivery to you,
Yes.
was so pivotal. And how is it that these people kept themselves happy, engaged, motivated? And when I spoke to them, I really realized that they said what they're delivering is not a package.
Okay.
What they're delivering are hopes, dreams,
Right.
aspirations, good news. So people look forward to receiving something from them, and they are the
them.
messenger. So I think to me that was such a pivotal moment of truth to realize
Absolutely.
that, when you look at your job as something that is really delivering happiness, hope to somebody. So that was one
It's
great,
beautiful, yeah.
it was a fantastic moment.
I mean, they actually looked for or found happiness in the mundane, right? In their day job, in their mundane job, they could actually have that perspective, which is beautiful.
Absolutely. And, then it shapes your perspective around, we worry about, very, very small things sometimes.
Yes.
And here is how, people are finding this. And this is not a management lesson, right?
Yes.
In some ways, it just comes from feet on street,
Yes.
kind of thing. That was one. The second was when, we had to, there were a couple of meetings that were happening at workplace, and there was somebody who was working through a meeting, who was there, and he was not his usual self in the conversation.
Okay.
And I was wondering why that was. And at the end of the conversation, I asked him, why was it that way? And he said that he had promised his daughter that he would be going and visiting a football match.
Oh.
And he was unable to do it because this meeting took place. And I asked him, why didn't you say so? He said, no, but I believe this was more important.
Okay.
And sometimes I believe that lessons like this sometimes teach you not just what you should do, but what you should not do as well.
Right.
So to me, a lesson that you could miss, or you had to miss in some ways, something which was like a daughter's football match that you had
Yes.
committed to. And you couldn't do it because you didn't feel confident enough to come and speak to your team or your manager or your organization to say, this is important for me. I saw that as a failure. And it just made me realize that, maybe there is something we haven't done right, that it doesn't give confidence to someone to do something, to come and talk about this, which is so important for them. Because the meeting can take place anytime.
Yes.
But imagine, how this gentleman is going to be feeling, having
Absolutely.
missed this.
No, and more than the gentleman, Amit, I had a similar situation,
Right.
when I was with Chroma, and one of my colleagues
Right.
was at work, etc. But later I got to know that she had actually missed her daughter's PTA at school.
Wow.
And she
Yeah.
had come, right?
Yeah.
So then I called her once and I asked her that, why didn't you tell me, there is a PTA? And she said, no, but there's a board meeting coming up, etc. So I said, yeah, but board meetings will come up all the time.
That's
If
right.
you would have come 1 hour late, what would have happened? So she said, okay, it's so I explained to her that, what happens is your daughter will always remember that you missed her PTA. I said, I will not even remember during your appraisal that you missed her PTA. How does that help you? It's not added any brownie to you. And your daughter will never forgive you because you missed her PTA. So, people need to also really make their choices. One is, of course, we have to make them comfortable that they should be able to come and say that. But I think this is a choice she made on her own because there was a board meeting. But board meetings are there every quarter. I mean,
Yeah, I agree.
it's
I
okay.
agree.
1 hour later or 2 hours later, submission is not going to shut down the
That's
organization,
correct.
right? So,
That's correct.
yeah.
And I think the third one was a recent video that I saw of really my favorite sports person, which is
Okay.
Roger Federer.
Okay.
And what he said is that he won, I think, 80% of the matches he played. Uh, and in that, he asked an interesting question. He says, "Do you know how many points of the total number of points that I would have played in my entire tennis career, in my single tennis career, how many did I win?" And the answer was 54. Which means he barely won more than half the number of points. Which means for every point he won, he lost one.
Right.
So I think the lesson for me from a happiness perspective was to stay in the present, which means you lose a point, but you've got to get back and start
Yes.
playing the next point as though you're starting all over again.
Right.
So key source of happiness that I realized from that was it's really about being able to live in the present. It's about being able to shrug off. And
Right.
sometimes I think the whole concept, I think what really comes in the way of personal and professional happiness is the baggage we tend to continuously carry. So I think these were three
Yeah.
pivotal moments
I
that
think,
really defined my
superb.
view about happiness as a concept.
So Amit, you spoke about Federer, and he's actually won 54 points, right, in his entire career to make those winnings of 80% of the matches that he's won, right? So obviously he's seen failures. Obviously he knows maybe the right points to win, right? And how do you really define learning from failures? How would you define finding happiness from that as well? And how does this link at the workplace? How can you bring this happiness to the workplace and learning even through failures?
So I think the one beauty of everything that Federer said, Priyanka, is the fact that you may still lose, about half the points that you play.
Yeah.
But it is important to win the critical points or the
Okay.
crucial points.
So you have to know what those critical points are to win, right? Yeah.
So it's about, in a lot of ways, if you were to look at it from a personal or professional life, it's about prioritization.
Right.
It's knowing about what is really important. So very often we hear this term about, I'm willing to lie on the sword, which means I'm willing to give my life up for this thing.
Right. Right.
The question to ask is, it's worthwhile giving your life up for something only if it's meaningful. I read somewhere, that they had already, that's all that said that, war particularly is not about who's right. War is about who's left.
Right.
Right. So if that's the way you want to see it, it's really important to get prioritization right.
Okay.
So very often, when I heard the concept first of happiness, and there is a view that happiness can be viewed as a bit of a fluff because there is no return on investment. How do you measure happiness?
Right.
And there will be some
Absolutely.
research around that. And
Yes.
in a metric-driven world, it's always a very difficult, question to
Yes.
think about or
Yeah.
ask about. Actually, I first heard the concept of happiness, maybe 10, 11 years ago from a great boss I had,
Okay.
Dr. N.S. Rajan.
Okay.
And he talked about the concept of, happiness as a level that's higher than engagement.
Yes.
So we started, at workplace, we talk about satisfaction, then we
Right.
talked about engagement.
Engagement.
Now we talk about happiness.
Correct.
And I was thinking 10 years ago, what does this mean? But now I realize what he was saying is so true because engagement means you're happy with the work you do.
Right.
Happiness really is because, the way the world actually has changed and the way we are really redefining it is our perspective has changed from what we do for a living to how we want to live.
Right.
And if you have to do that, the way we look or approach our work has become very different from the way we used to think about this earlier.
Right.
So from that point of view, if you were to just draw that segue, prioritization of what is really important for each one of us becomes a critical point. Now, one could argue, how can organizations do this?
Yes.
It's very difficult for organizations to do this. So, maybe happiness, if you think of happiness, it really comes from two parts for every individual. It comes from the quality of work that you get to do.
Yes.
So you really enjoy the kind of work you do, etc.,
You
etc.
find purpose in it.
So that's what I like to call as the mechanics of your work.
Right.
The dynamics of your work will come from who do you interact with, right? What are the people that you are kind of engaged with, do they make you better?
Right.
And that's the dynamic of how it is. And what I found is organizations tend to focus, as long as organizations can focus on getting a good blend of this. See, very often we equate happiness with engagement. So therefore, unkindly, sometimes people say that the R in HR is about Rangoli, right?
Yes.
So you do a Rangoli competition and, you kind of get people in and you do a little bit of song and dance, and that's what makes people happy. In my view, that is a little bit about the fluff, and that's
Right.
precisely why it's called that. But
Fluff,
do we
yeah.
really look at whether we are able to provide meaningful work to people?
Exactly.
Do people truly enjoy what they do?
Yes.
And if there is a belief that mundane work can't be enjoyable. And like I said, my first experience that I had
exactly that.
was exactly that you can make the best of work if it's available. So in my
Yes.
view, if organizations are able to really invest time, because that's about systems, about
Yeah.
processes, how do you keep people engaged around the quality of work that they get to do?
Yeah. So, it's also about, but there will be skeptics in the organization, whether it's leaders or employees. And there may be leaders who may come up to you and say that, the employee may be happy, but not necessarily he or she is engaged, right? So you may be happy coming to work because you're going to meet your friends and there's going to be Rangoli, for example. But that doesn't mean you're engaged. And therefore, engagement comes from what you said, that if you have meaningful work to do, and then therefore you are happy and engaged. So, but how will you convert these skeptics into believing in happiness at workplace?
So look, I think happiness, just like diversity actually, is a social concept.
Right.
It comes from a deep-rooted set of beliefs. So for example, we have this raging debate right now about people or Indians need to work 70 hours a week if we have to be a great country, whether we should work 5 days a week, 6 days a week. And in my mind, I'm thinking, therefore, we want to basically clockwork, right? We want to measure how long you are in the office.
Right.
And that's where I think skeptics really, where majority of people who are averse to this concept come from, is saying if you are not in office 10 hours a day, it means you are not working.
Irrespective of whether they got the outcome or not.
Exactly. So to my mind, I think it's important to recognize that productivity metrics, I always say it's not the work you put in, it's not the hours you put in at work, but it's the work that you're able to put in in those hours.
Yes.
As far as converting skeptics is concerned, Priyanka, I learned a long time ago that even in the world's greatest democracy or the world's largest democracy that we live in, it's the same thing again. The winning party will only have maybe 40, 50, 60% of the total vote that is cast. So we must recognize that there will be skeptics. The key is, as long as you're able to recognize that your skeptics are not key influencers in the organization, sometimes it's not necessary to convert all of them. You can live and let live. People can have a set of beliefs. But as long as you recognize that there are key stakeholders who are there, and very often, I think we make the mistake of believing that the only key stakeholders are the senior leadership. I'm not denying that they aren't. Of course they are.
Of course they are.
But a lot of influencers, are people, in organizations are not necessarily just the senior most people.
Yeah.
There are people in the organization that people look up to, that people hang out with.
They've been in the company for long term. They know the organization in and out, much more than maybe some of the leaders at times, right?
So these are key influencers. So if you're able to go back and have a conversation with these set of people,
right.
People can think of it one way or the other, but I'm a great fan of, movies, because I believe a lot of movies teach you a lot. And there is a scene that stays with me from a movie called Laksh, a brilliant film, by the way, by Farhan Akhtar.
Yeah.
And, Hrithik Roshan is, supposed to go, this is the Kargil story.
Yes.
And Om Puri, who's a sepoy, at a point in time, tells him, and basically loosely translated into English, it means he tells him that wait there after you've planted the flag because the enemy is known to come back.
Right.
And that's a lesson that really comes from the fact that someone like Om Puri has been on the ground
for years.
So for years. That is something that you can never learn. So, organization fabrics or dynamics really come from spending time with people who are key influencers who've
Yes.
been in the system for a while. And I think we miss this. And to my mind, the input that they can give you is such a key element of how you can seek happiness in personal and professional life.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Couldn't agree more.
Because then you know the answer lies in between.
Right.
So one extremity is 70 hours a week.
Yes.
The other extremity is remote working.
Yes.
Yeah? So you're never there at all. And
Correct.
otherwise you're there all the time, 6 days a week. The answer is always will lie somewhere in between. Now, what happens is, again, what are you trying to measure? Are you again trying to measure how much time people clock in, clock out? Or are you trying to see, is there a value that people are able to generate when they come in, when they have ideas, when they do things, etc.? Now, the other is we are trying to solve this as a one size fits all.
Right.
Now, very often what I hear is that a lot of people are in the, because manufacturing plants work 6 days a week, corporate offices should also work in the same way.
Yes, we work like that. Same in hotels.
Right.
That
So,
the-
and my point is, every job or every role needs a specific way in which the work can get done in an optimal way. So if you are in a hotel, the reason why you run 24/7 is that's because that's the way business runs.
Yes, I mean there are guests who you need to serve, but the same organization, hospitality in corporate doesn't need to do that, right?
That's the whole
Yeah.
point. Because typically, if you were to look at manufacturing, when you say you work 8:30 to 5:30, typically, once your shift ends,
It
your day
ends.
is pretty much done. But in most other cases, you have got workplace integration.
Right.
You're not going to say that just because my time ends at 5, I'm going to leave at 5.
Yes.
Especially if you have a meeting or a conversation or something that's required. So, in my view, the answer actually lies somewhere in between. And fundamentally, what I have narrowed it down to, honestly, Priyanka, is lack of trust.
Yes, I agree.
If you are able to trust people, fundamentally coming from the fact that 99% of people in the world actually want to do a good job, right? They are interested in being good professionals, because a very middle class upbringing is that work is worship.
Yes.
I don't think that has changed, even if this may sound reasonably provocative. I don't think that has changed with young people either. Young people also want to do
A good job
a
when they
good
come.
job.
Yeah.
It's just, it's almost a story of God give me patience but hurry. So they may not have the patience to do it, but everyone's interested in that.
Right.
If we are able to trust people that they will want to do a good job, and again, the example that I get cited very often is, oh, but you know what, this person was supposed to be work from home and I saw him or her at a movie theater. And yes, you will obviously have 2, 3, 5%
Who
of
will
people
do
in the
that?
world who will do that.
Yes.
But, and I'm saying this with apologies to my friend who work in the audit function. Why should you penalize 95% of the workforce
Yes.
for things that 5% do? Make an example of the 5%.
Yes.
Call it out as saying that this is not acceptable. But 95% should be reasonably fine. Because, very often, you and me, Priyanka, we both have, reasonably grown up kids now.
Yes.
And we spent a lot of our time telling our children, grow up, grow up, grow up.
Yeah.
And now the same grow ups are coming to the workforce and we want to treat them like children.
Kids.
We are
Yeah.
saying, come in at this time, do it in this way, do it whatever. So I think that's where effectively the dichotomy lies.
Absolutely. Yes.
If you are able to build the fundamental of trust, sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. In my view, this is one of those things. So I think hybrid working will work best when you know circumstances of people, allow people to make choices.
Yeah, so it's, I think, more about flexibility. Give them that
Absolutely.
flexibility, understand their life stage, their issues that they are facing. There could be a challenge at home, somebody's not well, and give that flexibility, right? And the trust is, I've worked in organizations, and of course, even you in the Tatas, where we begin with trust. Right. And
Absolutely.
until somebody gives you a reason to not trust, like going for a movie, and then you stop trusting and you deal with that separately. But what happens is, unfortunately, HR teams land up making policies based on this 5%, which 95% then people have to suffer. Right. I think that's really the issue or the challenge that comes about. That, to protect this 5% not misusing, you write policies accordingly. And you forget that there's another 95 that you need to take care of, who are trustworthy, who are willing to do, who are willing to go beyond So I think yes. But what would your advice be to leaders on how to create this trust environment? What should they change within? Right, they have to trust their employees.
So I think leaders, again, in my view, the best thing leaders can do really, because look, when leaders speak, people watch their feet.
Yes.
They have got to lead by example. And what do I mean by that? Leaders, in my view, should be able to do two or three things. One is they should make conscious choices of what works for them,
Okay.
but they should not necessarily impose that on anyone in the system.
I agree. Yeah.
Third is if they are able to trust people with outcomes. So it is possible. I mean, the belief sometimes is that, if you show too much empathy, then you can't be seen as authoritative or you can't get work done. And again, I think the answer lies somewhere in between, right? You can be nice but firm. You can be very clear on what is it that you expect, and yet make sure that if it's not done, you hold people accountable.
Yes.
I think the final thing that leaders, in my view, need to do really is articulate their expectations clearly. I think the big gap comes when you're not able to articulate what you need for and by when. So the big angst that I've found with a lot of people is, hey, my boss told me that he or she needs this presentation by tomorrow, and I worked through the night and I gave it by tomorrow. And when I checked 3 days later, my boss said, oh, you know what? It was actually not needed until Saturday. So, I just needed time to review it.
Okay.
Now that breaks trust. Because what you've done is you've compromised someone else's time.
Yes.
Just in order to get time yourself. So if you have to negotiate on the quality of work.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and also the person could have said that I need it on Saturday, but I need at least 2 days. If not by tomorrow, like, can you do it by day after, right? Yes, there could have been a discussion around negotiation on that.
And therefore, if you're able to communicate, I think we've got a very strong element of bias, which is that comes with a sense of generality. Young people are lazy; they don't like to work hard. Yeah. Or older people are not good with technology. They don't understand coding. I don't want to work in the same organization where people are, my boss is my parents' age. These are very sweeping generalizations that we make. I think that makes life really, really difficult for us.
Yeah, I know. So interesting that since you've spoken about bias, it wants me to shift towards another hot and favorite topic. All organizations talk about is diversity, inclusion, equity, right? You call it DEI, some call it IED. So I wanted to understand what is the kind of work you've done. I know you're a passionate believer of inclusion and diversity. So tell me about that journey and your experiences there.
So, the biggest mistake, and I think the biggest disservice that we do to diversity is by getting into metrics.
Right.
Because very often diversity, in my view, is about counting the numbers, but inclusion is about making the numbers count.
Yes.
And it's a very, forgive me for saying so, it's a very male way of thinking to say, what is it that we need to improve? Put a number. We must get 25% women, or we must have certain, criteria by which we do it. So what happens is once a goal is set out, you mindlessly start chasing it, pursuing it. What you end up doing, therefore, is isolating a population that already exists, which could be males, which could be anyone else. Could be anyone else, who then start believing that the only way you can grow, get opportunities, or become successful in this organization is if you belong to a particular gender. And that's the way you've killed the initiative.
Yes. Yeah, there are also times when, then they start talking to that person saying that you're a diversity hire. I mean,
so
you're
a quota candidate.
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, how demotivating that can be, when you're called a diversity hire.
It's and I think it's just disrespectful.
Yes,
absolutely. To go down that path, it's just disrespectful. Think of it the other way. Think of when your family last made a purchase of a refrigerator or a vehicle or anything. Think of who's the person who was the key influencer to make that decision happen. Very often is the woman of the house.
Yes.
So if that is your key influencer, that is your consumer. And it's my ardent belief that in today's day and age, every business is a consumer business. It doesn't matter B2B, B2C, ABCD. You can
Ultimately, there's an end consumer who's using
so
it.
you can
right?
use any combination of two alphabets and one number,
Yeah.
whichever way you call it. But finally, every business is a consumer business.
Yeah.
So if a great influencer on that is a woman, it's a no-brainer that you need to have more of them within the organization, right? To be able to make some of those choices.
Exactly.
Look at how subtly, for example, Scooty advertisements have changed over a period
Yes.
of time, right?
Yeah.
And now you'll always find that there's a woman who's doing it.
And there are lovely colors now on the scooters as well, right?
Exactly. So that's
Earlier.
that's a consumer preference or a consumer choice. So it's a no-brainer that you need to have more women into the system. Now, if you're able to, and MBA schools I think have started doing a reasonable job. STEM has started doing a good job. And again, my belief is that women fundamentally, genetically, are far more intelligent, empathetic, and have a far higher EQ than men have. So if that is the case, a lot of bias that comes, in my view, comes from a sense of insecurity. Because this is a species that's going to be coming in, that's going to take you over, in a matter of speaking. And in my view, it's just paranoia to be able to go down this path if you were to do it. So if you're able to create, systems that allow may the best person win,
Absolutely.
very often that will take place. The other is that there is this mistaken belief that only women need flexibility. In my view, everybody does.
Everybody does.
We just attribute it more to women in particular because we see them as the primary caregivers.
Yes.
Right? The spouse is not well, the woman has got to take leave.
Yeah.
Child is in class 10 or class 12, guess who takes the leave?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Parents and in-laws need a caregiver, as they're aging. Guess who's supposed to take that?
Yeah.
So as a result, what happens is, if you start looking at these life stages and then saying, we expect a woman to be able to do all of this, and then, by the way, also work 70 hours and also cut it in I think we're just being unfair on this.
So there's no equity there then, or equal baseline, if I can say so, that, all things being equal. It's actually not all things being equal, right? The women have 7 other things to do.
No, so it's, I had, this was again, another moment of truth that I had was with a male colleague when we were discussing this topic. And, he told me that, look, in my house, my wife does 99% of the housework and I do 1%. And I watch 99% of TV and she watches 1%. So we are even.
Oh, my God.
And that gives you a sense of how is it that people think about the subject, right? So this is another very social issue, which is, just like you can't be happy 9 to 5, you can't be a supporter of diversity 9 to 5.
Yeah.
It's got to begin at home. So it's social conditioning, which is why it will take time.
Yes.
But my belief is that if you are able to feed in, create the supply system now, wherein you've got more women coming in, and we've had some outstanding experiences, even, for example, in one of my organizations, there is a manufacturing line that manufactures TBR, which is truck and bus radials.
Okay.
And this line is run, the last time I was saying this, I said this line is manned by women.
Oh,
and the irony did escape me. So I said this line is now run by women.
Run by women, yeah.
And it's the most productive line we have in the whole company. And the reason why we have seen this or made this happen, as an example, is a lot of these women are not, and this plant is in Gujarat, that we have is in Gujarat. But a lot of these women have come from Chhattisgarh. They've come from Bihar. A lot of them are from Jharkhand. So therefore, again, they have come here as hope that their family has. As the first educated woman in the family who's staying away from home to be able to make things happen.
Right.
So that passion to be able to be far more productive, work better and make an impact is so high. So in my view, there is a great opportunity to be able to capitalize, because very often, particularly in India, we believe that India is about Bangalore, Mumbai and Delhi. India is about Rehala, Behala and Shambhupura.
Yes, absolutely.
70% of our population resides there. So there is
another India.
So there is a great opportunity to be able to really, leverage the diversity and the, how shall I say, the other India canvas if we have to really make an impact. So, personally, I'm very excited about the opportunity it presents. But like Spider-Man says, right, with great power comes great responsibility. So as
Yes.
long as we do it in a mindful way, I think we have a great future ahead.
So, Amit, I'm glad you talked about, inclusion starting from home. And I must say that I find myself really to be fortunate to have a very supportive family.
I can't think of too many men who would be grateful in terms of the point you just made about having a very
An opportunity.
supportive family and an opportunity to be able to do this.
Right.
I think there is an opportunity for each one of us to be able to change how is it that we can approach our thinking,
Mm-hmm.
not just around diversity but around the total overall concept of happiness that I know you're such a great believer of,
Yeah.
that we can talk about. But I know you're a great fan of something called circle of influence.
Yes, absolutely.
What's your thought around circle of influence, and
So, you know what I think, Amit, is there's only so much you can do. You cannot change the whole world. You can't change the whole organization. You can't change everyone in your family. And you still want to be happy, right? So, I think you can be happy by doing things which is within your circle of influence, things that you can make a difference to, things that which are in your control. And if you can do that, that is really a key to happiness. What is really in your hands is what you should focus on for happiness. Do you have any such examples, Amit, of what is in your circle of influence that has made a difference?
so I think that's a great point, Priyanka, and uh, I'm not surprised that it's coming from someone like you, because very often we tend, or most of us, or most men tend to overestimate their circle of influence. They think that they have, or we sometimes very often think that we have the power to change the world,
Right.
and we have to go about doing it, starting from the very top, which is, make significant, huge impact, and then ensure that it cascades and comes all the way
Down.
down. Sadly, the work doesn't work on our whims and fancies.
Hmm.
Very often, the world actually looks at it the other way. So, what if we were to say that our circle of influence is actually limited? It's very, very small.
Right.
Our circle of influence could be, or the people that we work with at workplace, and that's sufficient. So, we don't need to change the whole workplace.
Hmm.
We can start one person at a time at the workplace, someone that we work with on a daily basis, to be able to understand what are their motivators, what makes them happy, what makes them happy,
Right.
what triggers them, what are plus points, pain points. Very often, I've been in conversations where a lot of team members sometimes haven't spoken at all in meetings, and I know that they're extremely bright.
Hmm.
And the reason, and when you ask why, it is because they're hesitant, because they believe that they speak with an accent or people make fun of them.
Right.
So very often, and I learned a lesson very early in school from my English teacher, who said, you never make fun of an accent, because all an accent means is that the other person knows more one language more than you do.
That's right.
And it's a great
Absolutely.
humbling experience when you hear something like that. So your sphere of influence is around understanding what is it that people look forward to, what motivates them, and then drive them in that direction that can actually have that impact. So
Hmm.
it is a mistaken belief that it's only leaders, or top leaders in the organization who have the most circle of influence.
Hmm.
Granted, they cast a shadow over the organization, but everyone, even with a peer or someone that you spend time with on a daily basis, if you can have a circle of influence on your children,
Hmm.
right, who are a very
Right.
different kettle of fish to manage, and we can do an entirely different conversation around
Around
kids and
that,
what they
yeah.
do on that, right? But if you are able to find a way to be able to do it with them, I'm sure you will be able to do it with whatever small circles of influence that you're able to
Across
create
your life
otherwise.
stage, wherever
Yeah,
you are.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So that's another interesting thing that I come to, Amit. We've spoken about leaders, we've spoken about teams, and we are in a workforce which is multi generational currently, right? You have the Gen Zs coming in, and
Yeah.
you have a different set of expectations. Organizations are trying to figure out what makes them happy, right? So, what do you think can be a secret sauce that organizations can have, which brings all of these generations together, work collaboratively, and in a happy environment?
So if we step back, Priyanka, and look at the world around us, you know, 10, 15 years ago, if you were to take cricket as a sport, right, people loved to see, maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, people liked to watch test matches. They went on
Right.
over 5 days. Then people got bored and they said, let's play one-day
One.
internationals, which is 50 overs a side. It then came down to
20.
T20. It then came down to, what is known as the 100, a format of 100 balls per innings in London.
Right. Right.
So what? And if you look at what's the most popular form that people look at today, okay, they are reels on, on any social media platform.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. What's the most popular food that every child has, generally in generations has had, but is the go-to comfort food for anybody in today's day and age? It is 2-minute noodles.
Yes.
Which means life around us has come down to a stage where people simply don't have the patience. Now, the earlier we accept that, the easier it will become for us at the workforce, which means we need to tailor our things or our offerings, especially not just with young people, but with generally as a workforce, to think about how is it that we can keep people engaged.
Yeah.
And what that means is, earlier the theory around, what we did around what we ate was 3 big meals a day, right? So we focused, we chewed our food, we made that happen. The new theory that seems to suggest, how can you stay fit is have some 5-6 small meals in a day.
Yeah.
Can we think of restructuring our work the way we make work happen in the same way? Can there be multiple things that people work on? Because the one great thing about Gen Z is that, the one very common thing that obviously we know is that they are great with technology.
Yes.
In my view, I think they have got a great mind, simply because bear in mind that this is a generation. If you look at someone who's, let's say, 22, 23 years old today, in the last 20 years, they have seen a 9/11, right? They have seen the great crash of 2008, the financial crisis. They have seen COVID. They have seen governments come and go. They have seen, presidents, of their countries dramatically change.
Right.
World has collapsed. So, which means they have seen in 20 years what a lot of us have not seen in a lifetime.
That's right.
So, in my view, we need to give them a little more credit. They are a little more mature than we think they are, because what they have seen in the world has shaped their thinking. As long as we acknowledge that, and we come from a position, therefore, of saying that these people know a lot. It's not a competition. We don't need to know more than they do, but they come with a significant set of strengths,
Right.
that they bring into any conversation.
Absolutely.
I think that is a great starting point. So, can we leverage what they bring? And very often, I've another interesting thing that I had read at a point in time is that the word silent is an anagram of the word listen. So if you're able to just keep quiet very often and listen to young people, right? Hear them out.
Yes.
Understand what are motivators. Again, it is a bit of a sweeping generalization to say that, youngsters are always privileged, because again, then we are talking about the urban lot.
Yes.
People come with different sets of motivations. There are different things that make work happen for them. As long as, again, it comes down. So I think the golden principle always is trust. The other principle is empathy and understanding. The third is holding people accountable. So people should know that we expect them to, do certain things, deliver, etc., all of that. Fourth is, again, it's about being able to pick your battles wisely. It's almost like your kids, like we do it with our kids, right? We don't argue on every single thing. I think the final thing to remember is that everything need not be either picture perfect or a 36 ka akada. There are a lot of things that you should be able to disagree on respectfully, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Right? But as long as we are able to call that out. The problem is we see a lot of these conversations as factors that involve taking control. That's where there is a problem.
That's the problem.
So I think as long as we are able to provide reasonable flexibility, trust, and understand motivators of young people within this overall lens of they will have short attention spans. That's the way they have grown up. So that social ethos or that social circle is not going to change.
We have to accept it and allow it to come in the organization.
So the earlier we accept it, the better it is. And it's true of all their beliefs. The whole view that they have on LGBTQ as, as their orientation.
Correct.
the view they may have on live-in relationships. Some of these sound like blasphemy to us, right? Their whole belief about God, atheism, the way they vote. It's because we have, they have spent their entire life. We told them to stand up and talk.
Yes.
Now you can't tell them to shut up and sit down.
Yes, absolutely. The minute they come into work and, if they can't express, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think there's another interesting one, which I just recall, Amit. There's a fifth one that we could give as something that organizations could probably looked at. It was in one of my organizations I've worked with, something called reverse mentoring.
Yep.
Right? You spoke about them being very good with technology, and baby boomers who are still in the organization don't know anything, right? So there could be, mentors don't have to be only senior leaders mentoring the juniors, right? This concept of reverse mentoring could come into organizations where they actually mentor the older generation on digital, on how to use AI tools, on how to make reels. I think that will also make it interesting and fun for them, right? It will bring some pride that I'm teaching my senior something. It could do so many things. It could bring happiness. It could bring happiness even to the seniors that oh, I learned something new today from a Gen Z. So I think that's a very interesting one. Reverse mentoring as a concept could be another interesting take.
You bring a very, very important point, which I think is often overlooked, which is reverse mentoring. Gen Zs will always be ready to do it, Priyanka. What it needs is for a leader to believe that they are okay being vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what happens is, to say that I can learn from somebody who's, half my age, or, 20, 30 years younger to me, means that you've got to be comfortable with being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think a lot of us or a lot of leaders are conditioned with the belief of they need to be seen as picture perfect,
know it
all, and you cannot make mistakes. And I think that comes greatly in the way of happiness.
Yes, it does.
Because you are under constant pressure to be perfect all the time. And if you're seen as perfect, it's no coincidence that people who are hugely successful and seen as perfect at the workplace very often lead lonely, broken lives.
Yeah.
And if all it takes is the ability to say, hey, it's okay to be vulnerable, because none of us is perfect.
Absolutely.
Again, it's important to know what is it that you're vulnerable on. If you were to come back to the original, Roger Federer story, it finally comes down to knowing that you have weaknesses, but you are able to manage them in critical times is what makes you successful.
Yeah.
So I think leaders, as long as they accept that they can be vulnerable, and it's such a change for a Gen Z, to be able to say, hey, listen, I'm able to talk to somebody. And my belief is, Priyanka, 99% of Gen Zs will be happy to do this without the perception that older people may have, that they'll make fun of us, that they don't know this.
No, they won't.
Absolutely
actually
not. Absolutely.
They will love it. Actually, I've seen that.
So we should give them more credit than what we give them today. Is my
they will immediately come and tell you that, hey, why are you doing this? Do it like this. Use this tool. It will be faster. It'll save you time. And they get very excited with technology for sure. That I've seen. So now that we're talking about multi-generational workforce, one of the things, Amit, is become very critical that, upskilling will surely be required. Things are changing, technology is changing, and everything's changing fast, right? So what are some of those future skills you think organizations will need to adapt and groom their people into?
So yeah, you're absolutely right, Priyanka, that sometimes depending on your orientation, you can see this as a world of opportunity or a scary place to be in, which is, that runs on the edge of what they use in technology, which is that if it works, it's obsolete. So in that day and age, I think there are 2 or 3 things that will always stand out. I think one is the ability to understand that long term now means maybe 1 year. So, earlier the planning that we used to do of, maybe a short-term plan, a medium-term plan, 1 year, long-term plan.
3, 5, and 10 years. Yeah.
I think, it's very difficult to plan, I think, life in general and work life in specific beyond maybe 12 to 18 months. I mean, you can put out a plan because someone's got to put out a plan, but you've got to be really flexible and agile to understand that that will change. So I think one no-brainer is about your comfort at using technology. And I think the big misnomer that people have is, uh, technology is going to take over a lot of jobs, etc. All of that. Technology can give you a degree of predictability.
Right.
It can automate what is repeatable. It can never replace your thinking on how is it that you use the technology.
Absolutely. I
So
think it can make it a little faster. What you're taking, 2 hours to do, maybe it'll give it to you in 20 minutes. But I don't think it can take away, like you rightly said, the thinking behind what has to go into the project, if
no,
I can say.
absolutely. So which means the first thing that people should recognize is that the technology is for you. You are not for the technology.
Right.
So you need to know that it's because if you do that, see, technology is a great servant, but it's a very demanding master. So you have to treat it in that form, in that way. The other is the ability, I think, to be able to connect the dots. So to be able to understand that there will be a series of seemingly unconnected events that are taking place at any given point in time, at your home, in your organizations, etc. All of that really are important for you to be able to do it. So I think it's important to be alive to the fact that you need to be able to connect the dots. Now, that may not come from a normal sense of skilling, but that will come from your ability to constantly stay curious. And in my view, that's the one biggest thing that organizations need to focus on, to say, how is it that you're able to build skills of curiosity? Because curiosity, in my view, drives innovation.
Right.
So I think that is one very big piece.
That's a good one.
That is going to be there. I think from a skilling perspective, the days of general management, the way we used to do them, I think increasingly will come down. People will need to bet on an area that they are extremely good at. So I'm not saying that we will be in the age of specialization, but there are certain key skills or certain key functional specialities that individuals will need to build in themselves, that they need to master.
Yeah.
So think of the medical field, right? You used to earlier go to an MBBS doctor. Then you started going to a specialist.
Right.
Then you started going to if you have an issue of the heart, you would go to a specific heart surgeon.
Right.
Now there are specific doctors who only do specific surgeries or treatment for the left ventricle of your heart.
Okay.
Now that's a degree of super specialization that's taken place, because that is an area that people need to invest a lot of learning into.
Right.
So in my view, we will get to a stage wherein you need to have one really, really strong skill, and you can build everything else around that. Now, what is that skill? That is something that's a matter of how shall I say, aptitude, attitude. What is it that people are interested in? It could well be, I mean, some of the best people that I know, the greatest skill that they have is around social relations or networking.
Yes.
So they may not be good at anything, any specific individual thing, but if you need something, right, they know exactly where you will get it from.
Who to go, where to network, who to talk to.
So it's almost like the future lies in terms of being a party planner or a wedding planner. You need to know exactly where is it that you will be able to get flowers at a particular day. You don't need to get them yourself.
Yeah.
But as one of the famous men of the world has said, you need to know a guy who knows a guy.
Correct.
So that it's an outstanding ability to be able to have in that sense. So I think being able to find some of that and recognize that you need to be damn good at what you do.
I think that's what is going to really create
is
that
going
future.
to really make the impact.
Yeah. It's interesting, I was just watching some Insta reels, which we all do, and there are people who have now super specialized in all types of AI tools. So all they do is which AI tool you can use to do what.
Perfect.
So what will make your productivity better.
Yeah.
And they just spend hours together to figure out how many AI tools are there and what can I do. Which AI tool can make minutes for me, which AI tool can make my Excel work faster, which AI tool gives me those Excel formulas easily. They are experts at just that. They just love it, AI tools. So, I mean, that's what sort of made me wonder, what are those future skills? And I think super specialization, as you say, I
Yeah.
think is something that really is what is going to happen in the future.
And I think people will have multiple careers. I
Hmm.
think, again, because time spans are so short,
Yeah.
you know what you're doing today will be irrelevant in 3 to 5 years, or
Hmm.
the let's say the technology or the tool you use today
Hmm.
may not be relevant in another 36 months. So
Hmm.
what are you going to do after 36 months? You're
Hmm.
going to be thinking about the next tool
Next one.
or the
Yeah.
next technology.
Yeah.
And that's what sometimes scares me about our education system, Priyanka.
Hmm.
Because if technology changes every 2 years, imagine our engineering graduates, when they
Hmm.
pass out, they started studying something 4 years ago, and
Yes.
assuming that what they started studying was at the cutting edge of technology at that time, it has changed 2 times over by the
By
time
the
they've
time they
passed out.
finish, yeah.
So, what is it that we are able to do to be able to practically help people understand the value of the changes that are taking place in the world today, and what is it that they are what how is it that these changes will influence them, and in turn how is it that they can influence these changes, is I think where the great
Yeah.
opportunity lies.
Excellent. Yeah. So since we've talking about the younger generation skilling, etc., another thing that comes to my mind is they quit very easily, right? There are these instant resignations, very early resignations by the younger professionals, and I remember you talking about it once in the past that you've done that yourself and you have experienced that. What is it that you want to share on that? What is the advice you would give on instant resignations that
So Priyanka, I wish there was a secret sauce, if you will. um, I think what I've eventually learned over a period of time is that people have to figure this out their own way when they make their mistakes.
Mm.
Now, I was having a conversation with and I'm just saying this to illustrate sometimes the way young people think. I was having a conversation with the daughter of a very close friend,
Mhm.
and for some reason she thought that she could speak to me rather than speak to her dad.
Sure.
And what she was talking to me about was, she was in a relationship with this person, and she was unsure on whether she wanted to marry this person or not.
Mhm.
And we had a 10-minute conversation, and I had absolutely no freaking clue on what I could tell her. So I just kept listening. Um, and at the end, I just said, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that, etc. And at the end, she said to me, thank you so much, uncle. I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and get married. And if it doesn't work out, I can always walk out of the
Oh,
relationship.
okay.
And I realized that this is the conditioning that exists in today's day and age, to say if it doesn't work, I can always think of something else.
Right.
So partly it's about the confidence, and partly it's the scary thought that people like you and me would have about our kids saying, how can you think this way?
Yeah.
So what I think I'm realizing is that sometimes, you can never have a rational answer for any emotional problem.
Mhm.
And very often, I think when people quit, suddenly, things like that, most of them really are emotional issues that
Emotion.
people move with.
Hmm.
What I have found works sometimes is tell people, you want to do it, there's absolutely no problem. I'd like you to just think and sleep about this for 3 days.
Hmm.
Come back to me on day 4. If you still want to do it, I will respect your decision.
Right.
And then don't talk about it for 3 days. Just let the individual figure it out on their own. If they
Hmm.
still think this is the right thing for them to do in 3 to 4 days' time. So I think the only thing we can do is give them time
And space.
and space to be able to make their own decision.
Mhm.
Because sometimes, these things will happen. People will, companies now give long service awards in some cases when people work for 6 months or 1 year.
Yeah.
So we have to, this is a reality we have to adjust to.
Retention reward, we call it.
And very often people will quit for reasons you can't imagine.
Yeah.
People will leave because they want to go, they want to go scuba diving.
Hmm.
They just want to take a break.
Hmm.
These are things that you as an organization or professionally, you can never control.
It's not in your control.
It's not in your
It's
hands.
not internal. It's
Yeah, it's completely, yeah, on. So I think the best way to do it is to simply recognize that some of these things will happen. All you need to do is give time and space, give a little bit of empathy. If people come back and say, listen, I want to do things a little differently. And that's the only way. After that, if they quit, all you can do is
Wish them well.
wish them well,
Yeah.
and be open to the fact that you may want to hire them back in 6 months. So I think some companies that have got policies that say, I will not hire someone back who left me, in my view, that is just regressive
Yeah,
thinking.
yeah.
I think those days are behind us.
Yeah, no, and they'll have to really relook the policy. There are some who have the policy of rehiring,
Yeah.
but that's after 2 years, 3 years of
Yeah,
external.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that will not work either. If they're willing to come back and if they did a good job, I think it's fine to
I
just
agree.
rehire them
I
straight
agree.
away.
I agree.
So, Amit, in the last segment, I have something like a rapid fire. I call it quick shots. And I'll ask you 4 or 5 questions, and whatever comes to your mind immediately, you could just say that. So, name one leader who's been an inspiration for you.
Ratan Tata.
Okay. Your favorite book?
Atomic Habits.
Any favorite quote that you really live by?
This too shall pass.
Okay, interesting. And what's your definition of happiness at the workplace?
Happiness at the workplace to me is just the ability to be yourself. So any workplace that enables, encourages, supports, and advocates being able to bring your entire self to work is the first step to happiness. That is one.
Yeah.
And the other is, I think, this is like it's like being on a, the journey towards building happiness is like really being either on a treadmill or something like. You have to constantly keep moving.
Good. Thank you for that. And happiness in your personal life?
Too many to name, but I think just one, of course, is it comes from family. It comes a lot from running, because that's
Your
time.
me time.
Yes, time that you can spend with yourself. And it comes from the ability to be able to laugh at myself, which I think is which I thoroughly enjoy. Yeah.
Great. So it's been a very interesting conversation, Amit. Thank you for being on the show. I've really had some very good insights, some good punchlines that you've given me. And I'm sure the listeners are going to really enjoy this conversation.
So thank you so much for having me, Priyanka, and I really wish you, the very best for this. I think conversations around happiness are important, and I think happiness is a serious subject.
It is.
So we've got to invest time and effort, and I think we will all be, doing ourselves a service if we make the world a happier place.
That was Amit Chincholikar on Unplug with Priyanka. I hope you've been enjoying the conversations and have watched the other episodes. Please leave your comments on what else you would like to hear from us or any guest you would like us to invite. Looking forward to your feedback. Please subscribe to the channel and see you in the next one.